All right, Nick, let's talk about the Los Angeles Chargers. Chargers had a great offseason so far. I think there's a lot of good stuff happening with this team. But as we get through OTAs, mini camps, and we start to see new players pop up, we hear new good stuff. We're focusing on evidence from coaches, from offensive coordinators, from positions coaches, trying to figure out who is a new budding star on this team. And there's one guy in particular everybody has been talking about lately. I think it's going to be really exciting for the Chargers fans. We'll get to that and all the details in just a second here. But first, I'm Andrew, that's Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, Nick, as I alluded to, there's one guy everybody has started to go crazy about early on this offseason. We're hearing a ton of stuff about Aron Gadson, the second, a tight end drafted out of Syracuse, one of the most productive tight ends in the Syracuse history. Has been really, really good so far. But in the NFL level, coaches are already starting to talk about this guy. Let's get into the article and we can talk more about it on the other side. This, of course, is over from NBC Sports. It says Gadson transitioned from wide receiver to tight end while he was at Syracuse, and his receiving talent led Bishoff to compare him to a rookie player he coached during stints with the Ravens and the Giants. He says, I know it's a huge, huge forecast, but I was fortunate to coach Darren Waller, and Darren Waller was a receiver in college. Bischoff said in a press conference, we turned him into a tight end. He's got some of those traits. It's way early, but he's twitchy. He separates. He does some really good things in the pass game. I think he's become more comfortable in our system the last 4 or 5 days. I think people are beginning to see that. Well, it is a early prognostication to compare him to Darren Waller, but I love the comp, so to speak. It really starts to fit. And when you dive into the details here, I think there's something even more interesting. This guy actually matches up with Darren Waller pretty well as a guy that can fit that bill, can fit that mold. First of all, they're sized very, very similarly. But let's break into our chart here, comparing Gadsden to Darren Waller. And it just shows this is Darren Waller's final year in college. So just to clarify, versus Gadsden's final year in college. So guys coming out of college together, guys transition from receiver to tight end together. What are they looking like coming out of college? And as you can see here, first of all, receiving grade here, 86.3 for Waller, 82.3 for Gadsden. Similar, Waller has a slight edge on him here, but they're still similar, giving you that confidence. Hey, this guy is similar receiving level as Darren Waller was coming out of college. Second thing we have here is the amount of receptions. How much volume are these guys used to handling? How much of a feature can they be in an offense? What's the case here? And as I said, this is one of the most productive tight ends in Syracuse history. Of course, Gadsden has got almost triple the amount of receptions his final year as Waller did. So 26 receptions for Waller to 69 receptions for Gadsden. Really, really great there for Gadsden. Shows he can handle a lot of volume, be a feature in an offense. I think that's a really good show for him. Third thing we have here is the drop component. How good are these guys at catching? Do they have, bricks for hands, or do they have stick 'em on them? And both these guys, really good. 89.0 grade for Waller, 83.6 grade for Gadsden, showing similar level of, receiving ability here. Gadsden's been featured a little bit more. He's had a little bit more receptions, been the highlight of an offense before more, so he's got an edge on him there. But finally, the last one I thought was kind of interesting when going through is contested catches made in that final year of college. For Waller, 0 contested catches made. I don't know if that's because he's breaking away from everybody or he just wasn't that great at contested catches. Where on the second side, we see Gadsden, 17 contested catches for him. This guy used that size, 6'5", 236 pounds, to come out and dominate and be a contested catch monster there. Guy doing really, really great work. So overall, we see in the places where Darren Waller shined, Gadsden's as good as he was. But in a couple of other areas, Gadsden is able to outshine Darren Waller a little bit, which leads me to believe this guy could be just as good and potentially, I know it sounds a little crazy, potentially a little better than Darren Waller has turned out to be as well. Nick, curious what your thoughts are on this one. But before we get to you, Chargers fans, in the comments section below, talking about tight ends here, and I know I've already asked you, who's your favorite tight end in Chargers history? So we'll take that off the table, but we're talking about a tight end who transferred to be or transition from receiver to tight end, excuse me. So let us know who's your favorite Chargers receiver of all time in the comment section below. A lot of really great names, a lot of recent guys who've been really prolific with the franchise as well. So let us know. Are you going old school? Are you going new school? Let us know who's your favorite Chargers receiver in the comment section below. But nonetheless, Nick, what are your thoughts on this latest out of Los Angeles?
So this is all really good stuff, and we've talked about it a lot this offseason. The Chargers are obviously going for that two tight end package. And if you look at what the Chargers have got here in the comparison that everyone talks about with Gadson, you brought up Darren Waller. I think that's a very good comp. Obviously, getting that from the coaching staff was a good sign. But to me, he's a little bit closer to Isaiah Likely, who, ironically enough, is coached by Harbaugh's brother, of course, for the Baltimore Ravens. The parallels between these two guys are very interesting. Likely was a guy coming out of Coastal Carolina that had really solid size but not spectacular, good speed but not spectacular, was a good athlete but wasn't record-setting athlete. Likely was about 6'4", 245. Gadson's listed at 6'5", 243. Both of them are good athletes. Likely 36-inch vertical, for example. Gadson with the 34-inch. Both of those guys very productive at their collegiate level, but neither of them really jumped off the page. Both of those guys, both Likely and Gadson, were wide receiver to tight end recruits. So again, we're talking about very similar stylistically, almost very similar career arcs going into the NFL, from Isaiah Likely with the Baltimore Ravens, who's doing great things, to what Aron Gadson is going to do with the Los Angeles Chargers and has arrived to Los Angeles based on his pedigree. I think the Chargers have the next Isaiah Likely. It's basically what I'm trying to get to here. And for those of you who aren't super familiar with the Baltimore Ravens, Likely has become one of the more underrated offensive weapons in the entire National Football League. I think everyone looked at Baltimore a few years ago and they saw Mark Andrews, a Pro Bowl tight end, that way he was playing at, as kind of very close to that Travis Kelce level, an elite star. And then Isaiah Likely has just kind of emerged on the scene and gotten better and better and has become a really legit big-time receiving player at the tight end position in his own right. And I think that's what Gadson's going to become for the Los Angeles Chargers. I think both Harbaugh brothers here have a draft tight end steal on their hands. Obviously, the Ravens got it a few years earlier, but I think it's clear that the Chargers got their own equivalent right now with Aron Gadson. I think this is one of those things that people seem to always forget when you're looking for a lot of value, especially later in the draft. People look and say, okay, where can you fit in your scheme? What team did you go to? All that's really important. But I think another thing is, what kind of roles exist in the NFL for you, right? Because it's one thing if you're a good player, but you don't have a role, then teams have to create a position. They have to create a role, right? And that can be hard. That can be challenging. If it's not naturally built into your scheme, teams then have to go out of their way to, like, okay, this guy's a good player, he's a good athlete, but what can we do with him? We have to spend our time and effort to create something brand new. And that can be really challenging, and eventually teams give up on it if it doesn't work right away. When it comes to Gadson, the role already exists. It's what the Ravens did with Isaiah Likely, and he can immediately follow into that personnel package, that play grouping, that stylistic strategy that the Ravens use with Likely will be exactly what the Chargers use with Gadson, which means he'll be able to capitalize on that and be a big-time addition right away in this Chargers offense. And I think that is the most important thing, because if you look at LA, it's a very interesting situation with the Chargers. The AFC looks pretty good on paper, but it's certainly the AFC West. But when you take a kind of a stab into it and really dig into it, the Broncos, they were decent last year, but I think we can all agree they weren't quite as good as their record. They didn't luck into the playoffs. No one does, but they caught a lot of breaks. I don't think they really had any marquee moments, certainly late in the season. The Chiefs are overrated in terms of their win versus their actually, point production. We saw how they did in close games last year. They're still a good team, don't get me wrong, but they're not nearly as good as they were in years past. So the AFC West has gone totally up for grabs. The Buffalo Bills seem to be on the decline. The Pittsburgh Steelers have Aaron Rodgers. Who knows what's going to happen there, right? The Dolphins always underperform, right? You can go down the list here. The Texans have issues. The entire AFC South outside the Texans seems to have a lot of issues. So the AFC in general, and certainly the AFC West, there's no clear dominating force that can just completely take control of the entire conference. The Chargers are actually in a pretty good position to make a lot of noise here. They've got the right coach. They got the right quarterback. Can they add enough incremental playmakers around Herbert to help out this offense? And the emergence of a guy like Gadson, I think this season will have a big impact, but certainly going forward, could be one of those missing pieces, one of those missing links that can push this Chargers team to, hey, a playoff team to maybe win a playoff game, maybe not, to a team that can actually make a run to a Super Bowl. Obviously, the most important positions being the quarterback and how good their defense is going to be, and Joe Alt getting better in the running game, and obviously Harbaugh and his coaching staff. That will continue to be top billing, but it can be these sort of key role players that emerge as big time contributors that could push teams over the top. And I go back to that Isaiah Likely comp. If you talk to Ravens fans, they view Isaiah Likely as a true legitimate star, and he certainly is. He's a big time playmaker. Lamar Jackson loves working with him. I think Gadson can have a very similar role with the Chargers with Justin Herbert right away.
Yeah, Nick, I think the comps you're given there, they're very great as well. And I think that's the key here is Andy Bischoff is a guy that's been around a team that is really highly successful at developing the tight end position, whether it's Darren Waller, who's drafted by the Ravens, whether it's Isaiah Likely, and there's, Mark Andrews, Todd Heap, Ed Dickinson, there's tons of tight ends. Mac Williams comes out, goes to the Cardinals. He was pretty effective. There's a lot of guys. Dennis Pitta, just tight ends coming out of the wazoo for Baltimore. This is a guy who was heavily involved over a course of 6 years with the Ravens, just doing a lot of really good stuff, being a tight ends coach. Bounces around, goes to the Texans, bounces around, goes to the Giants, back with Waller again. So he's been around a lot of great tight ends and developed a lot of great tight ends. So I think the fact that this is a guy who's had his eye on so many great tight ends, and he's already seeing the early signs out of Gadson that, hey, this kid's got that it factor. He's got something special, whether he's a Darren Waller, whether he's an Isaiah Likely. He's got something that stands out to me, and I'm already, seeing it this early on. I think that's a great sign for Chargers fans. And we've seen the Chargers, they're having guys already, just rise up through the ranks here. We're seeing guys like Rice is doing great at the receiver position lately through OTAs and minicamp. We're hearing noise about tons of different players. If they can get a top end tight end out of this draft class, I think it's going to be one of the pieces that Justin Herbert has needed for a while now. And I think this guy, Gadson, can set up to be that piece. He's very similar to a lot of great tight ends. Bischoff noticed it, and I think this could be an absolute steal for the Chargers if this guy ends up working out.